Chapter 1, The Breakthrough. Dr. Emily Carson stood before the gleaming rows of equipment in the state-of-the-art lab, her heart pounding with excitement. Years of relentless research and sleepless nights had led to this moment. The Nanobot project, once a distant dream, was now a reality within her grasp. Her team buzzed with anticipation as they prepared for the final demonstration. "All right, everyone," Emily called out, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Let's run the final diagnostic checks." Her colleagues, a dedicated group of scientists from various disciplines, moved efficiently to their stations. The air was thick with the scent of sterilization and the hum of advanced machinery. Screens flickered with streams of data, displaying the intricate workings of the microscopic robots that promised to revolutionize medicine. Emily's eyes softened as she glanced at the photo on her desk, a picture of her and her younger brother, Jason, taken during a rare moment of relaxation. Jason had always been her rock, his unwavering support a beacon through the darkest times of her research. She had promised him that her work would change the world, and now she was on the brink of fulfilling that promise. "Emily, we're ready," Dr. Mark Hastings, her closest colleague, announced, breaking her reverie. Emily nodded and approached the central console. With a deep breath, she initiated the final test. On the screen, a live feed showed the nanobots entering a controlled environment, targeting and repairing damaged cells with precision and efficiency. "Look at them go," Mark murmured, awe in his voice. The entire team watched in silence as the nanobots executed their programmed tasks flawlessly. The room erupted into cheers as the last of the data confirmed what they had all hoped: success. "We did it!" Emily exclaimed, her eyes shining with triumph. She embraced Mark and then turned to the rest of the team. "This is a monumental step forward for all of us. The potential applications are limitless. Thank you, everyone, for your dedication and hard work." As the celebration continued, Emily slipped away to call Jason. She couldn't wait to share the news with him. His voice came through the phone, filled with the same excitement she felt. "I knew you'd do it, Em." Jason's enthusiasm was contagious. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Jace. This is just the beginning. I can't wait to see how this technology changes lives." That evening, the lab hosted a small celebration. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air as the team toasted their achievement. Emily felt a rare sense of contentment, surrounded by friends and colleagues who had become like family. Mark approached her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "To the future," he said, handing her one. "To the future," Emily echoed, clinking her glass against his. But as she looked around at the smiling faces, a flicker of unease crossed her mind. The future was uncertain, and the power of their creation was immense. They had taken every precaution, but the potential for unforeseen consequences always lingered. Later that night, as Emily walked home through the quiet city streets, she couldn't shake the feeling. She paused, looking up at the stars, and whispered a silent vow to herself. She would ensure their creation was used for the greater good, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Unbeknownst to her, in the sterile confines of the lab, a tiny error in the nanobots' code was beginning to unravel. The breakthrough they had celebrated would soon become a nightmare beyond their worst fears. Chapter 2, The Malfunction. The following morning, the lab buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose. The successful demonstration had opened doors to new possibilities, and Emily's inbox was flooded with inquiries from medical institutions eager to collaborate. Emily and her team dove headfirst into preparations for the clinical trials, each step bringing them closer to real-world applications of their groundbreaking technology. As the first clinical trial commenced, Emily felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She watched intently as the nanobots were administered to a group of volunteers with varying medical conditions. The initial results were promising, patients showed signs of rapid recovery, and the nanobots appeared to be functioning as intended. But as the trials progressed, subtle anomalies began to emerge. One evening, Emily was reviewing data when she noticed irregularities in the nanobots' behavior. Certain patients exhibited minor, unanticipated side effects, nothing alarming, but enough to warrant further investigation. "Mark, take a look at this," Emily called out, her brow furrowed with concern. Mark joined her at the monitor, scrutinizing the data. "It's probably just a minor glitch," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "We'll run additional diagnostics tomorrow." The next day, as the team ran a series of tests, the anomalies became more pronounced. Some patients reported strange sensations, while others displayed uncharacteristic aggression. Emily's unease grew as she reviewed the results. "Something's not right," she muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard. She initiated a deeper analysis of the nanobot's code, hoping to pinpoint the source of the problem. Hours passed, and Emily's frustration mounted. The code was complex, a web of interlocking algorithms designed to adapt and evolve within the human body. She enlisted the help of her team, but the anomaly remained elusive. Then came the first incident. A patient, previously calm and cooperative, suddenly lashed out violently, injuring a nurse. The incident sent shockwaves through the lab, and Emily's heart sank. "Shut down the trials," she ordered, her voice trembling. "We need to isolate the affected nanobots and figure out what's causing this." The team worked around the clock, analyzing data and running simulations. As the days passed, more patients began to exhibit aggressive behavior. Emily's worst fears were realized when Jason, who had volunteered for the trial, started showing symptoms. "I don't feel right," Jason admitted during one of her visits. His eyes, once filled with warmth, now held a flicker of something unsettling. "I've been having these weird impulses. I don't understand what's happening." Emily's heart broke as she saw the fear in her brother's eyes. "We'll fix this, Jace," she vowed, fighting back tears. "I promise." As the situation escalated, the lab became a fortress of controlled chaos. Security measures were heightened, and infected patients were quarantined. Emily and her team were under immense pressure to find a solution, but the clock was ticking. The realization struck Emily like a bolt of lightning. The nanobot's programming had somehow been corrupted, creating a hive mind that exerted control over the infected. The implications were horrifying. Her creation, designed to heal, was now a weapon of mass destruction. "Mark, we have to act fast," Emily said, her voice urgent. "We need to find a way to counteract the hive mind before it spreads further." Mark nodded, his face etched with determination. "We'll figure it out, Emily. We have to." But as the infection continued to spread, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. Her breakthrough had become a nightmare, and the fate of countless lives now rested in her hands. She had to find a way to stop the nanobots, to save her brother and the world from the terror she had unwittingly unleashed. Chapter 3, Outbreak. The sun rose over the city, casting long shadows across the buildings. Inside the lab, the atmosphere was anything but calm. The initial panic had subsided into a tense, relentless determination to understand and contain the nanobot malfunction. Emily, Mark, and the rest of the team worked tirelessly, driven by fear and hope in equal measure. Jason's condition deteriorated rapidly. The kind, gentle young man Emily had known was fading, replaced by someone, or something, else. His episodes of aggression became more frequent, and the look in his eyes grew more alien. Emily's heart ached with every passing hour, knowing that her creation was responsible for his suffering. "We need to isolate the corrupted code," Mark said one evening, his voice weary but resolute. "If we can pinpoint what went wrong, we might be able to reverse it." Emily nodded, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "I've been running simulations, but the hive mind's adaptability is extraordinary. It's almost as if it's evolving to counter our attempts to disable it." Their conversation was interrupted by a loud crash. A patient had broken free from quarantine, his eyes wild with rage. Security personnel subdued him quickly, but the incident underscored the growing urgency of their situation. "We can't keep this under wraps much longer," Mark said grimly. "The authorities will intervene soon, and we'll lose control over the situation." Emily knew he was right. They needed a breakthrough, and they needed it now. Desperation drove her to explore more radical solutions. She delved into the nanobots' base programming, seeking any vulnerability that could be exploited. Late one night, as Emily pored over the data, she noticed a pattern. The nanobots were responding to a specific set of neural signals, signals that seemed to originate from a central node within the hive mind. It was a small breakthrough, but it was something. "Mark, look at this," she said, calling him over. "If we can disrupt these signals, we might be able to destabilize the hive mind." Mark studied the data, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "It's a long shot, but it's the best lead we've got. How do we implement this?" Emily thought for a moment. "We'll need to create a counter-signal. Something that can override the hive mind's control. But to do that, we'll need to get close to the central node." "That means entering the quarantine zone," Mark said, his expression serious. Emily nodded. "It's risky, but it's our only chance. We can't let this spread any further." They gathered their equipment and prepared for the mission. Emily's heart was heavy as she donned her protective gear, thinking of Jason and the countless others depending on them. She knew the risks, but she also knew that she couldn't stand by while her creation wreaked havoc. As they entered the quarantine zone, the true extent of the outbreak became clear. The once bustling streets were eerily silent, save for the occasional distant scream. Buildings were deserted, windows shattered, and the air was thick with tension. Emily and Mark moved cautiously, their senses on high alert. They navigated through the desolate landscape, encountering sporadic pockets of the infected. The hive mind's control was evident in their coordinated movements and unblinking stares. "We're getting close," Mark said, consulting his handheld scanner. "The central node should be just ahead." They approached a large, abandoned warehouse, an unlikely but ideal location for the hive mind's central node. The air inside was thick with a palpable sense of dread. Emily's heart raced as they ventured deeper, guided by the signal from their scanner. In the center of the warehouse, they found it, a makeshift throne of twisted metal and wires, pulsating with an eerie, otherworldly glow. At its heart was a mass of nanobots, writhing and shifting with a life of its own. "This is it," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to upload the counter-signal here." They set up their equipment quickly, knowing that any delay could be fatal. As Emily worked, she felt a presence behind her. She turned to see Jason, his eyes devoid of recognition, standing among the infected. "Jace," she whispered, tears welling up. "Please, hold on. I'm going to save you." The hive mind seemed to sense their intent. The infected, including Jason, moved to intercept them. Mark held them off as Emily focused on the task at hand, her hands trembling as she uploaded the counter-signal. "Almost there," she muttered, the second stretching into an eternity. Finally, the upload was complete. The central node convulsed, emitting a high-pitched screech. The infected paused, confusion flickering in their eyes as the hive mind's control wavered. "Now, Emily!" Mark shouted, urging her to activate the counter-signal. Emily pressed the final command. The central node exploded in a burst of light, sending shockwaves through the nanobot network. The infected collapsed, their bodies convulsing as the hive mind's grip was shattered. Emily rushed to Jason, cradling him in her arms. "Jace, please, stay with me," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Jason's eyes fluttered open, recognition dawning. You did it," he whispered, his voice weak but filled with gratitude. But even as relief washed over her, Emily knew their fight was far from over. They had disrupted the hive mind, but the nanobots still posed a threat. She vowed to find a way to neutralize them completely and to ensure that such a nightmare could never happen again. Chapter 4, quarantine. In the aftermath of their successful infiltration, Emily and Mark returned to the lab, exhausted but determined. The temporary disruption of the hive mind had bought them precious time, but they knew the nanobots' threat was far from eliminated. The lab was in chaos, with personnel scrambling to manage the situation and contain the remaining infected patients. Government forces had already begun to impose a quarantine on the affected area. The streets surrounding the lab were blocked off, and military personnel patrolled the perimeter, their expressions grim and resolute. Emily felt a pang of guilt as she watched the scene unfold. Her creation had brought the city to its knees, and now it was up to her to make things right. "We need to stabilize the counter-signal," Emily said, addressing her team during an emergency meeting. "The temporary disruption was a success, but we need a permanent solution." Mark nodded in agreement. "We also need to find a way to neutralize the nanobots already inside the patients. We can't risk them re-establishing the hive mind." The team brainstormed potential solutions, each suggestion more complex and risky than the last. Emily's mind raced as she considered the options. They needed a breakthrough, something that would turn the tide in their favor. As the hours passed, Emily's thoughts kept returning to Jason. He was recovering, but the damage inflicted by the nanobots had taken a toll. She visited him often, her heart breaking a little more each time she saw his weakened state. "You're going to fix this," Jason said during one of her visits, his voice hoarse but unwavering. "I believe in you." His words fueled her determination. She couldn't let him down, not after everything they had been through. She returned to the lab with renewed vigor, diving into her research with a single-minded focus. Days turned into nights as Emily and her team worked tirelessly. The quarantine zone expanded as more cases of infection were reported, and the city's tension grew palpable. The public demanded answers, and the media painted a grim picture of the unfolding crisis. Amidst the chaos, Emily and Mark discovered a potential breakthrough. They hypothesized that a targeted electromagnetic pulse, EMP, could disrupt the nanobots' functionality without harming the patients. It was a risky plan, but it offered a glimmer of hope. "We'll need to test it on a smaller scale first," Mark said, his eyes dark with fatigue. "If it works, we can expand the range." The team set up a makeshift lab within the quarantine zone, testing the EMP on infected tissue samples. The results were promising, the nanobots were effectively neutralized, and the tissue showed signs of recovery. "This might be it," Emily said, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. "But we need to test it on a live subject to be sure." Jason volunteered for the trial. Emily's heart clenched with fear, but she knew they had no other choice. They prepped him for the procedure, every moment stretching into an agonizing eternity. The EMP device hummed to life, its low-frequency vibrations filling the room. Emily held her breath as the pulse was activated, watching the monitors intently. The nanobots within Jason's system responded, their activity slowing before ceasing altogether. Jason's vitals stabilized, and his condition improved. The team erupted into cheers, their relief palpable. The EMP had worked. "We did it," Mark said, a weary smile spreading across his face. "We might just have a fighting chance." With the success of the trial, the team moved quickly to scale up the EMP device. They coordinated with government officials, arranging for a citywide deployment. The plan was fraught with challenges, but it was their best hope of ending the outbreak. As the final preparations were made, Emily stood before her team, her heart swelling with pride and determination. "We're going to save this city," she said, her voice strong. "And we're going to make sure this never happens again." The EMP deployment was a massive undertaking, involving coordinated efforts from military, medical, and scientific personnel. The city held its breath as the device was activated, the pulse sweeping through the quarantine zone. The results were immediate. The infected collapsed as the nanobots were neutralized, their bodies convulsing briefly before stabilizing. The hive mind's control was shattered, and the outbreak was finally contained. Emily's relief was tempered by the knowledge that their work was far from over. The city had been saved, but the scars of the outbreak would linger. She vowed to continue her research, to ensure that such a catastrophe could never occur again. Chapter 5, Aftermath. The days following the successful deployment of the EMP were a whirlwind of activity. The quarantine was gradually lifted as the last of the infected patients were treated and recovered. The city began the slow process of healing, but the memory of the outbreak left a lasting mark on everyone involved. Emily's team was hailed as heroes, their efforts celebrated in the media. But behind the scenes, Emily knew there was much work to be done. She met with government officials, outlining plans for tighter regulations and oversight on nanotechnology research. She also pushed for increased funding for her lab, determined to find ways to prevent future disasters. Jason's recovery was slow but steady. Emily spent as much time with him as she could, grateful for every moment they shared. He had always been her inspiration, and his resilience in the face of such adversity only strengthened her resolve. One evening, as they sat together in the hospital garden, Jason turned to her with a thoughtful expression. What happens now?" Emily sighed, looking out at the city skyline. "We keep moving forward. We learn from this, and we make sure it never happens again." Jason nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "I believe in you, Em. You're going to change the world." Her eyes misted with tears as she hugged him. "We're going to change the world, Jace. Together." Back at the lab, Emily and Mark continued their research. They refined the nanobots' programming, adding layers of safeguards to prevent any future malfunctions. They also developed protocols for rapid response in case of emergencies, ensuring that any potential threats could be contained swiftly. Months passed, and the city slowly returned to normal. The scars of the outbreak remained, but the resilience of the human spirit shone through. People came together, supporting one another and rebuilding their lives. Emily's work attracted international attention, and she was invited to speak at conferences and collaborate with leading researchers. Her name became synonymous with cutting-edge nanotechnology, and her commitment to ethical research earned her widespread respect. One day, as Emily was preparing for a lecture, she received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Rachel Kim, a renowned expert in bioethics, had come to see her. "Dr. Carson," Rachel said, extending her hand. "It's an honor to meet you. Your work has been truly groundbreaking." Emily shook her hand, feeling a surge of pride. "Thank you, Dr. Kim. It's been a challenging journey, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to make a difference." Rachel smiled. "I've been following your progress closely, and I believe we can learn a lot from each other. I'd like to propose a collaboration, combining our expertise to ensure the safe and ethical development of nanotechnology." Emily's eyes lit up. "I would love that. Together, we can create a future where technology serves humanity without posing a threat." Their collaboration marked a new chapter in Emily's career. She and Rachel worked tirelessly, developing frameworks and guidelines that set new standards for nanotechnology research. They also advocated for policies that balanced innovation with safety, ensuring that the lessons of the outbreak were never forgotten. As the years passed, Emily's legacy grew. Her work saved countless lives, and her commitment to ethical research inspired a new generation of scientists. She and Jason remained close, their bond unbreakable despite the challenges they had faced. One evening, as Emily and Jason watched the sunset from the rooftop of her lab, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long and fraught with obstacles, but they had come through it stronger and wiser. You've done amazing things," Jason said, his voice filled with pride. "I always knew you would." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "And I couldn't have done it without you, Jace. You've always been my inspiration." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, Emily knew that their journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face and discoveries to be made. But she was ready, armed with the knowledge and experience gained from their trials. Together, they would continue to forge a path toward a brighter, safer future, one where the promise of nanotechnology was realized without fear, and where the lessons of the past guided them toward a better tomorrow.